He was the youngest doctor in the entire hospital, just 26 years old, still learning to hold back his nerves around patients. But the woman in room 9 wasn't like the others. She couldn't talk, couldn't move, couldn't even blink. Victoria Langford, a billionaire businesswoman trapped in a coma for 3 years after a so-called accident. No family, no visitors, no one who cared whether she lived or died, except for him. Every night, Nathan would enter her room to change her bandages. It was routine, until it wasn't. Because on one ordinary Tuesday, as he cleaned the scar on her collarbone, her eyes opened, and then she whispered 5 words that shattered everything. "Where's my sister?" She lied. Victoria Langford, 42 years old. Once the undisputed queen of the tech world, a CEO worth billions, whose name used to be the headline in every newspaper, every business magazine. But now, she's been unconscious for 3 years in a quiet, dark hospital room. It is said that she was the victim of an accident, but the details of that accident have never surfaced. Some say it was a suicide attempt. Perhaps she was under pressure. Others believe she was poisoned, a conspiracy by business rivals. And some even claim it was the result of an overdose. But one thing is common in all the stories. No one has come to see her. Not a sister, not a friend, not a claimant. Victoria Langford, unseen by the world, as if she had never existed. And then comes Nathan, a young, hesitant medical intern, still learning how to keep his balance in the harsh environment of the hospital. The senior. Doctors had long since lost interest in her case. No one had time for an unconscious billionaire who might never wake up. So Nathan was assigned, a task that seemed pointless to everyone else. Every night he would quietly go into room number 9. He'd change her bandages, examine her body, and sit in silence for a while. And perhaps, in that silence, a bond had formed. An invisible connection. She, lost in the noise of the world. And he, whose voice the world refused to hear. She was silent, forgotten. And so was he. Nathan's nightly routine had become something he never expected. What started as a duty, a simple task assigned to the new intern, had slowly evolved into a ritual, one he couldn't bring himself to break. Each night he'd step into room number 9, the quietest and most forgotten corner of the hospital, with its dim lighting and sterile smell. The flicker of the fluorescent lights did nothing to ease the tension in the air, but Nathan had grown accustomed to it. He'd sit by her bed, preparing to tend to her wounds, changing her IVs, checking her vitals. But that wasn't all he did. No, Nathan had started talking to her. It wasn't anything grand, just the mundane things that filled his days. "The professors are ruthless today," he'd say softly as he cleaned her wounds, his fingers working deftly. "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up with this pace. Med school's tougher than I thought." He would pause every now and then, listening to the silence in the room as if expecting an answer. Of course, there never was one. But still, he persisted. He spoke to her about the little things that kept him going. Late-night ramen. How he always burned his tongue on the first bite, and how he sometimes wished he could just sleep through the night without worrying about 100 things at once. At first it seemed silly. Talking to someone who wasn't even awake, someone who may never even hear him. But soon, it became his anchor, a way for him to find solace in the silence of her room. And then, little by little, something began to change. It was small at first, almost imperceptible. One night, as Nathan adjusted the IV line, he swore he saw her finger twitch. Was it his imagination? Had he been working too many shifts, tired to the point of seeing things? But then, the next night it happened again. A slight twitch. Just enough for him to doubt his own sanity. And then, the following evening, a tear slipped down her cheek. catching the dim light of the room. It was as if she could feel the touch of his hand, the gentle way he moved to tend to her. Nathan stopped. He held his breath, unsure if he had imagined it. But when he looked at her face, her expression remained the same, peaceful, almost serene. Maybe it's stupid, he muttered to himself as he continued his work, but it felt like she was listening. A part of him knew it didn't make sense. She was unconscious, trapped in her own world of silence. Yet, there was a connection. Something unspoken, something intangible, but undeniably real. Every night, he returned, repeating the same actions, speaking the same words, hoping, just hoping, that somehow, some way, she could hear him. He couldn't explain why it felt so important, but it did. He needed to believe that she was still there, that even in the silence, a part of her was listening. The sound of the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed above Nathan as he sat in the break room, his coffee growing cold in front of him. The weight of the conversation he had just had with the administration was still heavy on his chest. The hospital was a business, and businesses needed to make decisions based on the bottom line. That much Nathan understood. But today, the cold, clinical reality of the system had slapped him in the face harder than it ever had before. "We need to free up resources," the hospital administrator had said, their tone flat and rehearsed. "Victoria Langford is taking up space. She's been in a coma for 3 years. It's time to transfer her to long-term care. It's the best option." Nathan's heart had skipped a beat. The words felt like a punch in the gut. Victoria, the woman whose silent presence had slowly become part of his life, was just another patient to them. Just another liability. "She's still here," Nathan had argued, his voice a little more desperate than he intended. "I've seen signs. Something's changing. I swear she's showing signs of waking up. I think we can still help her." The administrator had looked at him with a mix of impatience and disdain. "You're wasting your time, Nathan. This isn't your decision. She's not your patient anymore. She's a liability." The words stung, and Nathan could feel his face flush with frustration. He had fought for her day after day, believing that something, anything could shift. He had believed in her. But to them, she was just another statistic, another case in a long line of faceless numbers. "She's not your patient." The words echoed in his mind. It was as if they had stripped away all his humanity, reducing her to a clinical case. Nathan had opened his mouth to argue again, but the administrator was already turning away, dismissing him with a curt nod. "I'm done here. Make the arrangements." And just like that, it was over. The battle he'd fought for days, weeks even, had ended in a few cold words. A decision made by people who didn't care about her, didn't care about him. He sat there now, the coffee growing colder by the second, the weight of the situation settling deep within him. He wanted to scream, to shout that this wasn't just about resources. This wasn't about freeing up space. It was about something much bigger. About a woman who, in her silence, had begun to matter. Nathan could feel his hands trembling with frustration. He was a medical intern, just a small part of a vast system. But he couldn't shake the feeling that somehow he had failed her. The frustration swelled within him. He clenched his fists and forced himself to take a breath. He wasn't done yet. He couldn't be. "They don't see it," he whispered to himself, his voice low and filled with quiet determination. "But I do." The system was broken, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. But one thing was certain. He wasn't going to give up on her. Not now. Not when there was still a chance. The fight wasn't over. Not for him. Not for her. The storm raged outside. Thunder cracked through the night sky, and the rain beat relentlessly against the hospital windows. Nathan stood by her bed, the sound of the storm outside a distant backdrop to the quiet rhythm of his actions. He was changing her bandage as usual, speaking softly in the same way he always did. "It's late, Victoria, but you wouldn't believe the kind of day I had. The hospital's a mess, and don't even get me started on my ramen." His voice trailed off, a soft chuckle escaping his lips as he carefully adjusted the dressing on her arm. The storm howled louder, but for some reason, the room felt impossibly still, almost too quiet. That was when it happened. Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly, ever so slowly, they opened. Nathan froze, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. His heart raced, and he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Her eyes, still dull with the fog of sleep, shifted. "To him, where's my sister?" she whispered, her voice fragile, weak, but unmistakable. Nathan's stomach dropped. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. No one, not even the doctors or the nurses, had ever mentioned a sister. He stood there, paralyzed, staring at her, unable to speak. The question hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Victoria's eyes fluttered as memories began to surface, fragmented and broken. Her voice trembled as she whispered through the haze. "Betrayed. Business. Sister." The words spilled out in pieces like shattered glass trying to form a clear picture. Nathan leaned closer, his heart pounding as she spoke. "Poisoned. She took everything." Victoria's breath grew shallow. "The crash wasn't an accident." Her words were a puzzle, a nightmare unraveling before his eyes. The sister she spoke of, the same one no one had ever mentioned. The one who had poisoned her to seize control of her empire. As the truth emerged, Victoria's consciousness flickered in and out, her grip on reality slipping away. She wasn't stable. Nathan's hands trembled as he grabbed his phone, recording everything. His mentor needed to hear this, needed to understand the gravity of what had just been revealed. He sent the footage, knowing that this was only the beginning. The hospital quickly moved to silence the chaos. Victoria's claims were dismissed as nothing more than hallucinations, the delirium of a woman who had been unconscious for years. "She's confused," the doctors insisted. "This is just a symptom of her condition." But Nathan knew the truth. He could feel it in his bones. The system was closing in on them, and they were trying to bury the story before it spread. Within hours, the legal team arrived. Lawyers in sharp suits, cold eyes, ready to make threats. "You're jeopardizing this hospital," one of them warned, their voice laced with authority. "You will regret this, Nathan." But it was too late. Nathan had already leaked the story to a reporter friend of his. The truth was out there, and no amount of pressure or threats could take it back. As he sat in the dim light of his apartment, later that night he thought about the chaos that had unfolded. "I didn't save her," he whispered to himself. "She saved me," from staying silent. And in that moment, he knew he would never be the same. Months had passed since that night. The night everything changed. Victoria Langford had recovered. Slowly but surely, she had rebuilt her life. Stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Now, standing at the podium of a global tech summit, she spoke with unwavering conviction. "I was betrayed," she told the audience, her voice steady. "But I will never let that define me. I'll use my story to change the system, to help those who are forgotten." Nathan watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. He had been with her every step of the way. Now he was a part of her groundbreaking medical startup, rethinking long-term coma care, creating new paths for recovery, and ensuring no one was ever left behind again. Victoria had never found her sister, but she had found something far more powerful: justice. And with that, the truth had become her strength. The world had underestimated her once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Sometimes, one voice, even if it's speaking to someone who can't respond, is enough to wake the world.